Welcome to Garden DC, a podcast of Washington Gardener magazine all about gardening in the greater Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic area. Your host is Kathy Jentz, editor of Washington Gardener magazine. This week is the Philadelphia Flower Show in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, of course. And this annual event is like Mecca for many gardeners up and down the East Coast, and some come from outside of that area. And I'm talking this morning with Marianne Willburn, a garden writer out of Loudoun County, Virginia. Hello, Marianne. And
hello,
I can
Kathy.
hear something in the background. Are you gardening while we're talking?
I am. You are so lucky because you caught me as I had just made the vow to leave my desk and go out and get some work done on the vegetable beds. So you're going to have to talk to me while I'm doing
no
that.
problem.
I have
I
to
totally
multitask.
relate. So, but it's unusual, right, that this time of year, the week of the flower show, we're actually able in the Mid-Atlantic area to go out and garden, because some years our climate has not been cooperative as this year has.
Oh, yeah. I mean, was it no, it wasn't last year. Year before last, I was at the show and it was sleeting and snowing and all sorts of nasty, and it was here too. But today I am actually, as we speak, sniffing my edgeworthia crescenta, which has got to be the most wonderful smell of late winter in the
Sounds
garden.
heavenly.
Fantastic
So,
plant.
Let's talk
It
quickly
is.
Philadelphia Flower Show, and then we'll probably get back to a little bit about what's going on in our gardens. So this year's theme was Riviera Holiday, a Mediterranean garden theme. So before you went to the show, what did you think it would be? And then when you got there, what were your expectations? Met or exceeded? Or what was your impression once you got there?
Yeah, I think my expectations were met, definitely. It's funny because I had just sort of thought it was a Mediterranean theme and not necessarily a Riviera theme. I wasn't doing my homework properly, obviously. But all year I've been thinking of it as a Mediterranean show, and that is so appealing to me as I live in a stream valley like a little woodland elf. And I want to have more Mediterranean, or at least mock Mediterranean plants in my garden. So, yeah, it did meet expectations. So, yeah, absolutely. What about you?
I didn't go in with many expectations for Mediterranean or Riviera Holiday. I think I thought there might be a little more glamour to it. That might have been my only expectation. And maybe I was thinking more big fields of lavender. Not that there wasn't lavender, but I was, plenty of lavender.
No, there was plenty of lavender.
I think other than that, I tried to go in with, open mind and not many expectations. So for me, it was just interesting. And I also think I thought that there would be more Mediterranean, I guess, gardens from not just the French Riviera, but say, a little bit of the Huntington or, California climate, elsewhere, that representation of Mediterranean style gardens.
Well, that's what I had thought too, but then when I realized that this was a Riviera theme, obviously that's not gonna fly. One of the things that I thought was super interesting that I recognized immediately was how those gray foliaged plants that are so typical of Mediterranean climates, in those kind of lights in that massive convention center, it's almost like they soak up that light. And so it feels very monochromatic, and your eyes really have to adjust, because at first it feels a little gray, rather than, because those plants need that sunlight. They look better in that sunlight. And that was fascinating to me, because you just sort of, okay, I've got to pick out the plants now. And Once we were there, you're sort of getting used to the lighting and everything, and the lighting is probably exactly the same year to year. But it's very different looking at, say, a tropical landscape or an exhibit versus that gray and blues and violet color palette. So that was interesting to me. I hadn't even thought about that.
There were a few of the showcase gardens in the front, which were just expanses of silver foliage, basically, or gray or silver foliage plants like Santalina,
exactly,
next to lavenders, next to all, several other herb type plants. And I think they tried to adjust the lighting as best as possible. You're right that indoor lighting just doesn't do justice to a lot of the Mediterranean plants. And so there was a lot also
it does not.
and I'm just blanking on the name of the large leaf silver plant that was like the hit at Manse last year. The Maryland angel wings.
Angel wings. The Senecio.
How can I forget Senecio? So at the Mid-Atlantic Nursery Trade Show last year, Senecio was the hot thing, and there was a lot of use of that, and I think that stood out because it's more on the white silver end of things.
Yeah, so it's definitely on the silvery side.
Yeah, it does take some adjustment because it can look like almost no color. One of the exhibits that I thought, I guess it was a demonstration garden of the Odysseus journey, which we use like a white sand, salty sand expanse. Do you recall that one?
Yes, which was that I reached down to touch it, which I'm probably highly illegal. Because I just wanted to see.
That's why I thought it was
it's rock salt.
It was, but it was the hardest one, I think, to photograph. It just does not show up well. Yeah.
Oh, it was impossible. Yeah, it was impossible to photograph. I mean, because I'm not Rob Cardillo.
So, for listeners, Rob is a legendary Philadelphia area garden photographer, and he does masterful work. But yeah, I would love to see what Rob comes from this. But then there were a few other exhibits that I think actually looked better in the photos afterwards than in person. So it's interesting, just like with us human beings. Some gardens look better in person, and some gardens look better in photos. And some of us are more photogenic than others, and it doesn't mean we have both of those. Some people are lucky to be both. How's that? and some gardens are lucky to be both.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, some of them were hard to. I don't know. I found myself in front of other exhibits and designs, standing for a longer period of time and looking at them in great detail. And these I could take in a little bit quicker, maybe. I don't know if that's unfair. They were great. There were a lot of details in some that I immediately wrote, took a picture of, wrote down. I'm going to do this at home. But I'm not sure. The plant palette, did it seem samey to you, or
I think there is a Mediterranean plant palette, a classic one. So they did stick pretty much to that. Then there were some demonstration gardens that went a totally different direction, and I was gonna come back to what you said about things that you thought you might note and use at home. Let's put a pin in that and circle back to that later, because we definitely want to talk about that. But I wanted to talk about what I thought was the most popular exhibit on the floor, which was the Princess Grace wedding dress surrounded by roses.
Oh,
it was just like, just chocked full of beautiful shrub roses and beautiful, and you could not get near that garden. The crowd around it was crazy.
Yeah, isn't it crazy that she inspires that still today? Hold on, I have to yell at my dog. Mungo, come on in here. Okay, come on, that's a boy. And I thought it was so interesting. I had brought a friend up with me, and I thought it was so interesting that in this day and age, when Meghan Markle is so vilified, and everybody hates her. the Brits and the Americans. Okay, I know you don't. I'm not a massive fan, but Princess Grace just is still
yeah, I was going to use the word
iconic
worship
for people.
Yeah.
And yet she did, she did the exact same thing. Now, many people would say that she did it very, very differently. And I would be one of those people, but I did think it was just interesting to me.
Yeah, I would say because she also because you're looking from a Philadelphia point of view of her, because she is a favorite daughter of the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah, and you know what? I didn't even realize that, because just call me a California idiot on that one. But I did not. I didn't realize that. Besides knowing that High Society was from Philadelphia Story.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not that has anything to do with it, but yeah, I didn't realize that. So I learned a little bit on that particular one. But yeah, it was very cool. That was very well done. I loved the blue bottles that were hanging back in the corner there. I thought that was gorgeous. I will be doing that.
A recreation of ocean habitats, interpreted by floral designers. And I believe it was AF. I can never say their letters correctly. AIFD, which I think is American Institute of Floral Designers. I hope I'm saying that correctly. So they got some of their best floral designers in, and each of them did an element that would reflect an ocean landscape or ocean, under the ocean theme. And yeah, I believe those blue bottles, it's like hanging blue bottles on chains, I guess, almost like a rain chain, but blue bottles. Yeah, they were put together with, I think, just hemp string. Actually, I don't think they were on chains, and I thought it was very effective. Yes, just catching the light, and you know what? It looks terrific in a display. You bring that back to my place, and we have the kind of winds we had 2 nights ago, and they're all broken, and it's all terrible. So, and actually, that brings me back to a point that I wanted to talk about for a second, and that is, this is a floral show. This is not a garden show, or even a garden design show, I think, because much of what we're seeing is fantasy in terms of what plants can grow together, bloom at the same time, handle winds. Well, yeah.
But, well, I mean, that is, I mean, that's a silly part of it. But for instance, one of the displays, and I can't give you the name without looking at my notes, was just a perfect outside alfresco eating situation. Really a lot of attention to detail on all of the terracotta, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was this lawn they had put down sod all the way around it to pop the green. And I thought, that's just, I mean, it just wouldn't even survive, much less even be thought of being planted there. And but then I thought, well, why is that bugging me? I have seen hellebores blooming with echinacea at the show before, and you go, yeah, well, it's a floral show. So it's, what are they trying to do? You know, what colors are they trying to pull out? And it's important for home gardeners to realize when they're going to see the show that some of this is just pure fantasy, that it is like a large
in some aspects, definitely. And I would say, you know, obviously having grape hyacinths, muscari blooming next to salvia that's fall blooming for us, just not going to happen. But in our climate, but up in Quebec in zone 4 and 5, guess what? They can do those. So zone 7 for us, no. But yeah, I disagree partly on that it's just a flower show, because it is Pennsylvania Horticultural Society's biggest fundraiser of the year, and they are trying to push horticultural and gardening knowledge. So, you know, in addition to the floral displays and the flower arranging, there's my favorite part of the show, and I don't know if this is yours as well, Marianne, which No, actually,
is the horticourt?
The horticourt's yours. This year it was flipped. It was to the back of the horticourt, which is the educational exhibits put on by the local trade high schools, local colleges, and some of the plant societies.
Those were good.
They do a tremendous amount of education. So it might be, say, the local Delaware Rhododendron Society and Azalea Society showing their plants planted in situ. So in the situation you would find them. And then EPA even has an exhibit of all native garden water landscape, like a bog type landscape. So I think that's where you're going to get your more realistic education and take home ideas. So you come in, you experience the fantasy, your day in the Riviera, you experience, the top for floral arranging, and then you come around to the kind of left-hand backside of the hall, I guess what I call it mid hall. And that's like the gardener's hub and the educational exhibits. And that's where I tend to spend most of my time at the show. So you said the horticourt, which is where the heart of the show is. So from
that's where it started.
Plant competitions, bringing in forced bulbs, your greenhouse plants, your house plants, and then maybe even some plants from your garden. So what are your favorite categories in the horticourt?
Oh, well, I love all of their spring bloomers. I always love seeing what if they're edgeworthia or better than mine. They never are.
So why aren't you entering yours in competition, Marianne?
Well, because I don't want to dig mine up and put it in a pot.
True. And there is the being beaten up back and forth for travel for us. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. They have an incredible selection of begonia there. Just, if you just want to get an education on begonia, walk through there. And the terrariums are always amazing. And the terrariums always look fantastic. And it always tickles me a little bit because they look like they've just been put together. Because you and I know what a terrarium looks like after about a week. It's hard. It's hard to see in there because there's naturally a lot of condensation. So it's cool to see them set up. And I'll go back real quick, and I will take back the terrible things I said about it being a flower show.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you that was all there, and it's definitely there. But for your average home gardener or person who dabbles, the shock and awe stuff is often what they remember. And it's what they want to do when they get home. And the reason that I know this really well is because I almost always take somebody like that with me to get their reactions of it. Sometimes it's just my husband. Sometimes it's a friend, but they're not super well versed in gardening. And so it's interesting to see what their reactions are to the different spaces and what they come away with.
And that's a really good point, Marianne, because I don't want to call you and I jaded, but
I'm not jaded. I'm just cynical.
We're seasoned, and to me, I believe this is my 17th flower show. I'm gonna, I'm a wee child of 21, so
This is amazing. You've been doing it this long.
All right,
incredible.
That's my home phone. Please ignore that, listeners at home. I'm about to hang up on them. That's the foibles of having an office phone along with your recording your podcast on your iPhone. So getting back to our point about us seasoned flower show goers, and so we've seen many, many flower shows in the past, and there's been highlights and lowlights and things that we loved, and after many years, there's some things that still stick with me. So what was one of your favorite shows?
I'm curious. I can immediately tell you, and actually it's a very much a floral display, and that was the Brilliant show, which I think was the England show. I know it was the England show. I think it was titled Brilliant.
Let me look that up, because I'm standing in front of my refrigerator and I have several of the past show magnets on my refrigerator.
It was, I think, 7 years ago, maybe.
Union Jack on it, and
Well, one of the top Philadelphia area floral designers, although they were young, like up and coming, and I cannot remember the names. It's terrible. It's like remembering the jingle of a commercial and not remembering what they were selling. It was the Mad Hatter's Tea Party.
Yes.
And do you have any memory of that?
That might have been Flowers by David, but I'm going to do a quick Google on that.
It was insane tablescape from hell, huge table set, just gorgeous up, and it was up. It wasn't, they had done it up about 2 feet. They had dug magnolia stellatas, I believe. No. Spectrum, I think it was a Soulangeana. And they had then taken, I think maybe like tulip poplar. Sorry, my rooster is going crazy. That's your phone, my rooster. And they had affixed those to the branches of these magnolia, and to top it off, they had they commissioned a sculptor, a sculptor who worked in cast bronze from England, to do these 4 about 3.5 to 4 foot tall statues of the Mad Hatter and Alice and the White Rabbit. And it was just one of those that I stood in front of for a half hour. I came back. I stood in front of it for another 10 minutes. I came back with a glass of wine. I stood in front of it for 5 minutes. It was just eye popping. It was everything that you'd want from a floral design. And I mean, I also have memories of garden design as well, but that one just hit me in the right spot. I'll never forget it.
So you're right. It was 2013. Brilliant Britain.
Okay.
But I'm wrong. It's not Flowers by David.
It was a couple, I think.
Attractions. So they did the Foggy London Streetscape, I believe, Flowers by David, which I also liked that year. So I'm going to try to keep Googling while we're talking. What's your cup of tea? Britain's. So Mark Lane. Nope, that's still not it. It'll come to me because I know who you're talking about, and they did I agree, a fabulous job.
Yeah, it was inspired. It hit every creative button there, and just, I mean, before we get to whatever your boring choice is, that is the other thing about Philadelphia Flower Show, is that it has an incredible amount of tablescapes, and it seems like it's more every year. Like, they're recognizing that people want to entertain with their gardens, and I'm seeing more and more. And so I'm always snapping photos of, hey, that makes a great table charger, or that is a fantastic centerpiece, or what a great way to mix up your chairs or your tableware. This year, I swear there were probably 10 tables set out, not even including bistro tables.
I agree. It was lots of tablescapes. I think that's a lot to do with just
Mediterranean
the flower show, the high-end florists who are making these little fantasy vignettes of parties are looking to sell their service for like a floral installation for, say, your wedding or an anniversary party. So that's a lot of them showing the best of the best that they could do for that. So I was going to say my favorite of that year, and you're probably going to totally disagree with me, but I will never, ever forget the Jack the Ripper garden that year. Never forget that. Yes.
I am going to disagree with you on so many levels of disagree. Oh my gosh. Like, I didn't even want to go into that was black corner of neon. Why are we friends?
I don't even know.
I don't understand. You'd better have a good case for this garden, because
we'll call it a floral display, but it was
we'll call it a random act of violence to my psyche.
And guess what? That's exactly what it was. I think it was a really avant-garde flower installation that not only made you feel like great art does, but made you think. Because I came out of that like, like just totally changed what a flower show exhibit could be. They were not afraid to be dirty, messy, scary. They weren't afraid to like turn people off. And yeah, it's definitely a love or hate thing for that exhibit there. But I love that he based it on the theory that Jack the Ripper, just his existence, brought in a new era in London. They cleaned out the back streets, cleaned up crime. It brought in Scotland Yard. And if he hadn't existed, London wouldn't be what London is today. So out of this horrible person came this beautiful, in a lot of people's opinion, city. It's not like London.
In my opinion.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
No place is perfect, but imagine if that hadn't happened. It would have taken probably another 50 or 100 years to come about organically, when in this short period of time of freak out, it made a huge push to advance the city itself. So, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. And all I had to do was go into a black area with neon and scratchings and just lunatic ravings.
So
it was fun. So did you need a drink to walk through there? Because just so you know, I didn't need a drink to look at the Manhattan Tea Party.
But maybe you needed a drink afterwards.
Oh, I did. I actually had one while I was looking at it, but it wasn't medically necessary the way it was with Jack the Ripper.
So other years, when I ask, always take a bus group of my magazine's writers up to the flower show every year, and I like to ask them on the way back what their favorite flower show was, and also what their favorite this year was. Most of my attendees, some of whom are hardcore gardeners, some are beginning gardeners, some are the spouses being dragged along to the flower show. I would say the majority always cite the year of the national parks centennial anniversary as their favorite.
That was extraordinary.
To me,
100%.
that for me was an okay year. Like, yes.
Okay, so now I want to dig down into that, because I have to say it astounded me, and I'm a big proponent of the national parks. But I didn't expect much from this. I thought it was going to be a really tough theme. And they went above and beyond. In fact, I was describing the way they had those 4 screens with the tear-jerking movie.
Oh, yeah.
And the entrance was a very large lodge. And because I come from California and grew up very close to Yosemite, and we used to go to the Ahwahnee so that we could watch rich people eating ice cream. I wish that we could too. It really reminded me of that it absolutely typified that lodge. It was a great show.
I do agree that was one of the best entrance gardens, that you were immediately immersed in big national parks. Like, you felt like you were in it. And the photography that they used, that they sourced from all over the internet, from different professional and even amateur photographers, some of those were amateur, were done. It was just done beautifully. So
now back to this year's show, and I'm allowed to be a little critical, right? Okay. If I haven't been already, I was not thrilled with the entrance, and I think because I didn't love the pinks and the purples, and that I thought it lost the earthiness that the Mediterranean has to me. There's a really earthy quality to the way that the garden blends into the land, garden tools, garden pots, garden furniture. There's just an earthiness to it, and that wasn't there. It felt much more glitzy, and maybe that's because it's the Monaco Riviera thing.
Yeah.
And also the music. I walked in expecting to, be dancing to, I don't know, Stacey Kent or something, and singing some little song, but it was like hip now French music, and I mean it went back and forth, but I don't know, it was not as exciting to me as some of the individual exhibits.
So interesting. So I think when I came in that front entrance, I did not even detect music because I came in midday, so it was probably being drowned out by the crowds. But I did hear distant accordion music because there was a traveling accordionist. I believe that's the term.
Oh, what cool.
And I was going to ask you that next. So this year they broke up the performances and the education. So they didn't have a major education stage or real, they just had a small gathering area for some of the garden talks and the gardener's hub. And they had what they called poppies carts, these little carts that went around the floor around every half hour or so. And they might explain a planting technique or a floral technique. And then they had a few just carnival street performers that you would catch every once in a while. So one was a young lady on stilts. She was masterful. She was terrific. One other young lady I caught she had butterfly wings. She was a gymnast. So she was doing a great job. And then, of course, that accordion player I told you about. And then a kind of juggler magician type guy. So did you catch any of those or any of the poppies carts?
I didn't. I don't think that they were on view for the Members Day because I went during the Members Preview on Friday afternoon, and it was not long enough, in my opinion, because they've got to do the gala later in the evening. But it opens pretty late. So no, they didn't have that stuff on. I mean, it felt like I had plenty of time to get around the show itself, not as much time as I might have liked to go to all of the vendors, because that's always a fun part too. What I love to do on a normal day is to go around the show, go around the horticourt, go to the vendors, wander around, then go get a glass of wine and wander around the vendor, wander around the
marketplace.
No, not with a glass of wine. I'd be in a lot of trouble if I did that. No, I wander back to the exhibits and look at them in more detail.
Do the exhibits change with that glass of wine?
No. No, but I could tell you my wallet would if I walked around the vendors with that glass of wine. Yeah. So that's normally what I end up doing. And I couldn't do that this time. I had to just sort of see everything once. I didn't get as much time in the horticourt as I would have liked. But it still was it was a good amount of time.
And I agree that so for those not familiar or who don't go on the opening day, they open late because the judges are still judging. So you're opening kind of at noonish or after 1. And then that first evening is a huge gala benefit. And I'm betting you're correct that the performers were part of that gala that night.
Oh, yeah, they were definitely there because I was looking at Rob Cardillo's posts on it and I saw a couple of who you were talking about.
And then I was going to circle back to the bar just to say that a few people commented to me who were first timers at the Philadelphia Flower Show this year that they were astonished that, starting at 11 a.m., noon, whatever it is, there are open bar serving, selling alcohol in several spots all over the show floor. And I'm like, yeah, it's a party.
Of course they are. I mean, besides the fact that it's a show, for God's sake, this is about friends.
Oh, sure.
And I mean, the idea, don't be so Puritan about it. I mean, I can't even imagine that wouldn't be part of it. You go into the Chelsea Flower Show, and I swear the thing is probably sponsored by Pimm's and champagne and various types of champagne.
That explains the rave reviews of Chelsea Flower Show.
That's right. Always take them with a grain of salt. But truly, it's everywhere. That is part of the fun of it. And, people are responsible. I'm not advocating walking around in a drunken haze.
Correct. And I was going to punctuate that. I think the surprise is just that the bars are opening before, say, 4 or 6, because a lot of other home and garden shows, they might have bars, but they usually don't start till late in the afternoon. And I think that what's the great thing about Philadelphia is it is so transit accessible and easy that you can just walk straight out to the SEPTA station. And if you live on the main line, say, you're basically door to door. So, and by that time, hopefully your 1 or 2 glasses of wine have worn off. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I'm glad that they do that. I think it adds to the feeling of a party almost. Not a gathering. Do you know what I mean? I think it's a very, it's not clinical. It's not sterile. I think that I appreciate that they do that.
Not at all. So in our last few minutes on this year's flower show, I was going to ask for 2 or 3 highlights or take homes that you got from that.
Okay, well, let me think. One of the first ones was a new dinner plate charger idea, which was a large terracotta saucer.
Like a garden pot saucer?
Wow. Yeah, like a garden terracotta saucer under a plate.
And so economical, too.
So, well, no, they're not actually. They're very expensive, but if you have them, it's sort of fun. I have so many small terracotta pots that using them in the tablescape as they had in a couple different displays is a great idea.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I was personally paying a lot of attention to some of the tropical plants that they had in these displays, how they were using them, even though it's not a tropical climate. And again, this is a floral display situation, but I was looking at a few of those and thinking I need to use more Scheffler elegantissima in my garden. I have one plant, I need more.
And that plant, for the listeners at home, that plant lives inside your home for winter. Yes.
It does. It comes inside, and it's also known as the false Aurelia. And it has a very ferny texture, but it's a very dark purple. I can't say black, but as close as we get in the garden, in the industry to black. I love that. What was another take home? Get a Vespa as soon as possible. Please stop putting this off, Marianne. Just buy yourself a damn Vespa. You've wanted one since you were 22 and rode around Greece carefree. I think that if I get a Vespa, I will stop being
it's like a mini time machine. Zoop.
I think it is my long overdue midlife crisis.
That's a pretty tame one. On the scale of things, that's pretty good. Yeah.
How about your take homes? What were they?
I would say that I do need to use more silverleaf plants in the garden. So I was like, after that immersion and that, I was like, I had, the Dichondra Silver Falls last year, and we had our garden club sale, and I only ordered 1 tray. Luckily, pulled 2 plants out for myself before I set it out for the sale, and it flew off the table and turned around, it was gone. So this year I'm definitely going to order several more trays because it's just an amazing plant, and it even went into December for me. It's supposed to be an annual for us.
Oh, wow.
And I think I really like the mixing and some of the education exhibits. One of them was a small town, like a small town in Greece, I think, where you're walking up a hillside and you start off on cobblestone, and then you're on tile, and then you're on pebbles or different. So I love those.
Oh, I remember that because they had sort of a glass tile square area on a slight slope, which was really super slippy. And I looked to my left, and there was a very large pincushion cactus. And I thought, oh, this isn't going to go well for somebody.
I think it actually the difference in the textures when you're walking through a garden, it's not the most, say, visually coherent, but changing the path texture to make people slow down and notice it. I've noticed that in some of the Beatrice Farron gardens, but she doesn't generally use, such jarring material next to each other, one after the other. But in a mini exhibit, that's, they're showing you it in miniature. So
yeah,
I thought that was interesting.
I've got another. Oh wait, are you done with your
I only
3?
said 2, but you go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I'll do 1, and then you can do your last one. Because this is a garden one rather than a tablescape. I know I always tend to go that way, but there were 2 of the exhibits that had a dry stream bed that was meant to be water, but on the corners of the dry stream bed, they were lined with white round rocks, maybe about 6-7 inches. But on the corners where it would wind back, those corners were very lightly accentuated by a slightly larger rock.
Yeah.
And it made all of the difference. That was a huge take home for me, was accentuating that twist, and not just because your eyes don't go straight to the end of the stream. They sort of hit that curve, and then they hit another curve, and then they hit another curve. And that was a big garden take home.
Yeah, that's a nice way to highlight it with that change. So I'm going to say I'm going to combine 2 for 3. So there was a lot of use, because one of the kind of minor themes to the show was relaxation in the garden or refreshing yourself.
Yeah.
So there were several gardens with literal beds in them. So the Waldorf orchids had a big, beautiful blue bed under an arbor.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was one garden that had a really stunning white, large, I guess it was a twin size mattress garden swing. And it was all blue and white, like Mediterranean themed pillowscape on there. So I was like, who doesn't want that? And I've always wanted to take an old garden, old bed frame, like a child's like brass bed, and plant it up as a garden bed. So I was like,
right. That is a really cute idea, because obviously so many of these Mediterranean ideas with soft cushions and beautiful expensive furniture in a mid-Atlantic climate are just become algae and mold.
And you have to take them in and out
so quickly. And like I'm looking right now at my summer hammock, which I didn't even bring in for the fall this year because it was so green at that point after 3 years of wear. And we bring it in every year for the winter. This year I was just like, what's the point? It's got to be replaced because it's just absolutely green, and it's coming apart. We have a totally different climate, so the soft furnishings you have to take with a grain of salt. But I love the idea of
definitely a literal bed, a
plan to that bed. So what do you think? Are you going to go for the Senecio this year? Are you going to try it out? I've heard different reviews.
So I did have a couple last year that I trialed in containers, and they kind of melted. I have to say, they didn't do so well for me.
Yeah.
But in the Senecio's defense, they were in mixed containers, large containers, where I probably should have put them where I put my lavender, which is at my front garden curb, where high traffic area, but crappy soil and a nice little bit of a slope there, which is probably what they would have preferred.
I think that's the general consensus in our climate is it's got to have well draining, poor to average soil and a very sunny site. And I think I am probably not going to be able to grow it for that reason.
On my front corner,
my full sun is 7 hours.
Yeah, my front corner is, at the height of summer, 14 to 16 hours of sun out there. So if it could, if the lavender does well, sunflowers do well, it's where things that can take a beating go in my garden.
You are rich with sunlight. I'm so envious.
Well, I'm envious of a lot of the wet shade you have. So.
Well, that's true. I will say that at the top of July, very, very hot July, it is easily 10 degrees cooler here than it is up at the top of the road. And that is insane, but true.
So
thanks to car thermometers, I can tell now.
It's called the urban heat island effect.
Yeah,
So I'm
very
going to
much
do a
so.
quick wrap up of the flower show, and then we're going to talk about our gardens for a second more, because we can't stop talking about our gardens.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. I have weeded 2 beds while you've spoken to me, so this is
now
great.
You're making me feel lazy. All right, so hopefully our listeners out there are also listening and weeding at the same time. It's a very zen experience. So Riviera Holiday, theflowershow.com, runs through March 8th. So that's while we're recording this on Thursday, and the show will run through Sunday. Hopefully I'll get this podcast up tomorrow, and you'll still have the weekend to get up there and visit it if you haven't already. If you are agreeing or disagreeing with Marianne and myself's opinion on the show, I want to hear what you have to say. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at WDC Gardener, and you can find me on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And Marianne,
so not on Twitter. so not on Twitter, but I am on Instagram. You can find me there at Marianne Willburn or at Small Town Gardener.
And on Facebook.
And on Facebook too. If you want to argue on Facebook, that's all they do on there. So let's get started.
And I'm going to circle back. I did Google as you were talking and weeding. So I did. I'm a multitasker too.
You're amazing.
So Petals Lane, Petals plural, did the Mad Tea exhibit in 2013.
Yes, that's right.
And they are located in Roxborough, Pennsylvania. I believe it's a Philly suburb, and it's Brittany Gillespie and Michael Finney. And that was the brilliant theme. And they said, I'm going to scroll down here, that they describe it as Philadelphia's primary destination for floral design and artistic consultation. So, and they were 30 and 32 at the time, and wedding design is their passion. So what you were looking at was, if you were a really, I guess I'll call it experimental bride, and wanted to do a Mad Tea Party theme for your wedding,
if you were an experimental bride who was very well heeled.
Oh yes. And it says that their vision was to combine Disney's Alice in Wonderland and Tim Burton's version with Johnny Depp, which I did see a lot of the touches from that in there. And the bronze is from, they said, his name is Wonderland Bronze, from Robert James Workshop in Dorset, England.
Yes, he's in Dorset.
So that's probably why you gravitated to it. And that made total sense for the year in Britain.
It was so beautifully done. Memorable, and that's pretty cool when you can create something that sticks with somebody for a long time. That is a really cool thing.
Exactly. So it is the first week of March in the Mid-Atlantic Gardens. I'm in the heart of Zone 7. Are you also Zone 7, or are you like 6B, Marianne?
I dream of 7. I am 6B/7. If I had a nursery here, I would call myself 100% 6B, because I wouldn't want to lose stock. But I like to push it a little bit. You are definitely a half a zone hotter than I am.
So I'm on the Washington, D.C. border, and you're
in the belly of the beast.
And you are across the river, not the border, from Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, and Brunswick, Maryland, but you are in Virginia.
That is right. It is what Scott Berlin calls the benevolent outer rings of DC.
I don't know about benevolent.
Yeah. Benevolent, meaning, what did he say? He said, close enough to take advantage of the wealth of DC, but far enough out that something. It was very well done. He is good at what he does.
I'm going to change the word benevolent to parasitic.
Well, that's what I said in my letter back, but you can read that tomorrow on Garden
Okay,
Rant.
so for the back and forth of the history between Scott and Marianne, go to Garden Rant, a very popular group garden blog, and they've been having a American versus UK garden sensibility discussion.
Yes, and we've managed to iron out some differences.
So aside from weeding this week in the garden, what else are you doing in the garden?
I am very tardily cutting back all my grasses. I should have done this about 3 weeks ago, but I got into a car accident when I was down in Miami, and it has put a real wrench in the work. So I am a little behind on everything. So I went to cut back the Pennisetum, the miscanthus, and it's already greening.
Yes.
And so I really had to move on that. I did a lot of shaping and pruning yesterday of some of my larger shrubs, just for shape, not necessarily because they have to be done. And sighing heavily because the bees are dead again.
And this is your honeybee hive.
These are my hives. We've been keeping, no, not the native bees. We've been keeping bees probably for 10 years or so. And it's an expensive proposition, I have to say. And last year was a real difficult year, just generally as years go. And I really did no fall management, and you need to do fall management to have healthy bees. And so I just sort of prayed, and that doesn't work. Evidently God doesn't get involved in things like that. So
well, he wanted you to
she
wanted you to learn the lesson of gardening, which is patience and sometimes
take care of your stuff.
But I do live by the benign neglect school of gardening. But
that just doesn't work with bees.
Exactly. For animal husbandry and bees, benign neglect does not work.
So this year I will be trying to attract swarms, because my California sister, all of the hives, all the colonies she gets are all swarms she catches. And I am out of shekels to pay for more hives. So I'm going to try my hand at catching a swarm this year too. I've done it before, but it's been many years, and try and take better care of them this year. And I cut all of my chickens' wings yesterday to stop the little brats from getting in my garden, but I'm chasing one out of it now. Go, go, go. Go, 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 go.
Nice.
Because they're jumping up on the barn roof.
So you are
and getting out. So.
And you are reminding me why I don't have chickens and bees.
Yeah.
But I do want to circle back for our listeners on 2 points. Why were you in Miami, and your car accident was just a little fender bender, correct? You're okay.
Yeah, I am okay. It wasn't a fender bender. It was a proper car accident on the interstate, in a lift car. Nice. But we are all okay. We're really fortunate on that one. Just whiplashed and messed around a little bit. I was down there for TPIE, the Tropical Plant International Expo, and I was speaking down there to the Digging In conference. It's a group of professional container gardeners, and they get together every year and twice a year in different locations. And this year they were combining it with the amazing show that is TPIE.
Nice.
So I was down there both to do research for my new book, and also to talk to that group, and not to drink rum punches because I was doing a dry January. Can you believe that?
I think that was insane, but
it was insane. Oh boy, but I made it. Only 1 out of 10 people apparently make it, and I made it. I was one of the 10.
Kudos to you. So I was going to say, I'm not envious at all about Miami in January, since I went to Chicago to give some landscape talks there. The opposite
That's
direction.
Right, you did. But I would so rather go to Chicago, not
but
in January.
I did luck out, and we had actually decent weather in Chicago. So thank you to the weather gods. And also I'm going to note, in my own garden, even though I've been Philadelphia Flower Show trip obsessed, getting together our bus trip, I did manage to get out to Brookside Gardens this past Sunday morning to join the Potomac Rose Society in cutting back a large portion of their rose garden. And so I learned a few new techniques, and it was all volunteer event. We put a good dent in it. Hopefully Roger, who's the head gardener there in charge of the rose garden at Brookside, approves of each of my cut decisions. I did because it was my first time doing something of that scale. I tried to be on the conservative side so he could come back and do a more severe prune should he wish. And then because I was so inspired and I was already all geared up with my leather gloves and protective clothing, I came home and hacked at my David Austin roses and some of the what is it called? Oh So Easy, and some of the other landscape roses I have around the place that I've kind of let go to pot. So I'm hoping.
Now, I'm curious on this one because I would have thought they would have done that job about 2 weeks ago because of our weather patterns.
Exactly.
So were they behind or
they had
or not?
Originally scheduled it to be the previous 2 weekends and then they pushed it back. Exactly. Every year it's very weather dependent, and actually and Sunday morning was actually in the 20s when we were out there, and then it warmed up to a nice afternoon, of course, after we left. But the roses have already leafed out, so we were slightly behind. But we're still well within the window. I would say for the Mid-Atlantic, to get your rose pruning done by, aim for by St. Patrick's Day. And that's probably a good around then type. And I was, like you, slightly worried that it was a little late, but looking at what Roger had already pruned and also some of the pruning of some of the fellow Potomac Rose Society members, that I was like, okay, roses are pretty sturdy stock, and even if you cut them almost all the way back to that bud union, they're probably going to flower still for you this year.
Well, there was a study done several years ago that compared the results of flowering with roses that had been sort of arbitrarily hacked with a shearer, a trimmer, and those that had been very carefully pruned. And they found that there were not significant differences in the flowering.
And that makes
that
sense.
Stuck with me.
Yeah. And I would say that makes, some beginning pruners out there.
If you're feeling scared, don't worry about
it.
It's better that you just get it cut back a bit, because that is a problem if you leave these roses getting more and more of a huge bramble, and then you've got a problem.
Exactly. So mainly it's cutting out some of the inside and some of the old woody stock that's getting kind of brittle inside there, and things that are crossing. And was that a dog?
That is Mungo, because see, he chases, whenever I dig, he chases what I'm throwing, and I'm sort of one-handed digging up this blackberry, and he's waiting for me to throw something in his face, which is apparently how he has fun. Isn't that right?
And Mungo's breed is?
A Jack Russell, through and through. Okay.
So my kitties are standing by, but being super quiet right now, thankfully.
Well, that's what kitties do.
Although I have one talkative one who would love to be on the podcast one day. So, so we're gonna wrap up with this one, and I'm gonna try to, as I said, get this up and online as soon as possible, so those who still want to catch this year's garden show can do so. If you are listening to this later on and after the garden show is finished, I'm going to give you next year's dates and theme. So next year is habitat for the overall theme of the Philadelphia Flower Show. And the dates are March 6th through 14th. So a little later next year.
Okay, great.
And the overall, and we had a little bit of a press conference meeting with the PHS staff yesterday, and the habitat theme is a very broad one. They talked about a possible collaboration with the Philadelphia Zoo. So I think, like a lot of their past themes where it's open to broad interpretation, it could be more on the animal side of things. Some of those could be more on the insect, which when I hear the word habitat, I think bird and then butterfly. What do you think when you hear the word habitat, Marianne?
Well, it's probably because where I live, but I think of toads and turtles.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
And I think it's just because of where I live. I think of skunks and bears and and all sorts of things that we see on a regular basis here. So yeah, it's certainly bees, and we've got a lot of bees here, native bees here too. So real quick, is your forsythia coming out?
My forsythia already have some blooms.
Okay.
Opened up, as does my thundercloud flowering maple. I don't know why I just called it that. It's flowering plum.
Okay.
I called it a maple because it has a red leaf, kind of similar to a maple coloring, and it keeps that coloring all year round. So a lot of people mistake it for a maple.
And how is your edgeworthia? Oh, that's right, you don't have one.
Guess what? I don't want one, but I do visit some of the edgeworthia at Brooks. On Instagram the other day, I posted a beautiful edgeworthia. I just blanked on the variety. It's a white one, almost all white. And that's in back of the visitor center, very near the path in the children's garden.
Okay.
So
it's probably snow cream, I think.
Yes, I was just about to say it has snow in the title. I think
it's snow cream. It's one of the more popular cultivars. That is, it's just such a great shrub. It's actually, if listeners are interested in just finding out a little bit more about it, it's featured on my March garden post. If you're gardening in the Mid-Atlantic, there's a March garden there on my website, which is smalltowngardener.com.
Okay. And what would you say for somebody who wanted to grow edgeworthia? What would be like a couple tips? Because it's not for everyone.
It's not for everybody, no. It's a well-draining soil. And in our sort of summers, I think a slight amount of shade, partial shade, is a real good idea. If you can.
So probably morning sun, afternoon shade.
And you know, I say that my edgeworthia gets afternoon sun and morning shade, which is just the way that it is, and it seems to cope with that. But I think it wouldn't handle full sun as well as it does. It needs to be in a non-exposed site for wind, if you can help it, if you're in a cold climate. So. And it isn't for everybody. It can be a difficult shrub to grow. If you think Daphne, it's a Daphne relative, and so it can be a little temperamental. But I adore mine. I love the scent this time of year. I think it's just such a neat shrub. It takes up a lot of real estate, so you got to give it room.
And some of my listeners are probably hearing the word Daphne, and a dagger is going through their heart. Because Daphne is one of those heartbreaking plants that you just fall in love with it in somebody else's garden, and then it can live 3-5 years for you, and then have a quick decline,
sudden Daphne death syndrome. Yes. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Enjoy it while you have it. There's just like another lesson for gardeners in that. And I am going to wrap this up. Any final thoughts on anything March garden related, flower show, or about those pesky chickens that are giving you a run?
No, they may be butchered by the time we talk again. I don't know at this point. They're really annoying me. I would say definitely to listeners, go out and go to some public gardens and see what is blooming right now, so that you can make a note of it and plant it so you can have an early spring garden coming alive too. But you're really not going to know how it behaves for you unless you see it in another garden in your zone, in your environment. So if you're in the DC area, go to Brookside, go to Green Spring. And if you're up in Philadelphia, go to Longwood, go to Chanticleer, go down to Lewis Ginter if you're down by Richmond. It's important to go to these public gardens and see what they can do with plants at every time of the year.
Exactly. And I was just going to make a little side note to say Chanticleer is not quite open for the season.
Oh, you're right. Yes, I forget. Okay, so go to Mount Cuba. Isn't Mount Cuba open?
Yeah. And also winter turf for the March bank.
Yes.
That's one of the highlights in the Philadelphia and Mid-Atlantic area.
Yes.
Don't beat down or climb the gates at Chanticleer. We'll be in big trouble.
That's right. They got to wait until they get their tropicals up and cooking before they'll open up. Yeah. Okay.
And that was going to be one final note that I took home from or observed at the flower show, which was the teacup garden.
Oh, yes.
That's at Chanticleer.
That's right.
I believe there were 2 echoes of that famous Chanticleer teacup garden in a couple of the Mediterranean gardens. And the other echo I thought I saw from Chanticleer, which is a very influential public garden on a lot of garden designers in our area, was the use of large agave in many places. Of course,
yeah,
a lot more used in the Mediterranean gardens, but in the mid-Atlantic as, say, a specimen plant or a focal point plant, of course, it's not going to stay outside all year for you.
No, it is not. I have a funny story about that. I had to execute mine last year. Mungo, come down here. Come on down. Yeah, I had to because they get so large. I took some pups off of it, which are currently in the house, and this thing weighs, I would say, or it weighed probably 80, 90 pounds, and every single end of every long leaf is a spike of death.
Exactly.
You know, and you can put corks on it, but the corks fall off while you're trying to move it. And I put it on the back of my golf cart, and it took me forever. And then I asked my husband if he could just move it into the garage. And I forgot that my husband likes to do it the easiest way possible. And so he tried to back up the golf cart to the back door, which is ridiculous. And he moved it. When you start a golf cart, it moves with a jolt. And you guessed it, he did not hold on to the plant, and it just went poof. And once you've broken the meristem, that central growing point of an agave, it never looks okay. It's, you know, it's like a broken nose. It's really quirky and attractive on a guy, but it is really ugly on agave. And I gave it a year, and then I'm like, oh, this is never going to be pretty again. So I took some babies, and then we had to leave it out in the cold night.
Oh, nice.
We had an exhibition night.
I'm glad you were able to save some of its children.
I did.
So that's a good thing.
I saved 3.
And better you than me trying to hold that thing in.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, you know, it really gives you pause, because all of those agaves that are at Chanticleer or elsewhere, they have to be moved in and out, and you really do need to think about that. So that's one thing. If you're working with some of the bromeliads, which aren't so spiky but give you that strong impact, but an agave it's a lethal weapon. Truly.
It is. It's a plant that I fear personally.
Yeah.
I have baby agaves as windowsill plants, and I pay them much respect.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so I was going to say, for beginning gardeners out there, when you see a large agave sitting in a garden, in a public garden, know that, you know, 3 or 4 garden workers probably put that in place, and then 3 or 4 people are wrapping it up, getting it onto a golf cart, putting it into the greenhouse, and babying it through. Yes. So I was going to close out by giving some suggestions for people who might be in the DC area to visit. In my schedule, I will be visiting the U.S. Botanic Gardens 200th anniversary exhibit, which is going on now through October. So congratulations.
Very
for 200 years, U.S. Botanic Garden. It's a great record. And at the same time at the U.S. Botanic Garden is Patrick Daughtry's stickwork sculpture, which we
early winter, didn't you? Yeah.
Yep. So we featured it, I believe, on our November cover story, was an interview with Patrick. So go look up that on WashingtonGardener.com, and then go explore that stickwork sculpture, because it is meant to be an interactive landscape sculpture, and it's fabulous.
I don't do selfies
with the U.S. Capitol in the
unless
background.
I'm with selfie people who force me to, like you.
So exactly.
Yeah.
But you're so photogenic, Marianne. And then the third thing you can hit while you're at the U.S. Botanic Garden is the orchid show that they share with the Smithsonian Gardens. So in even years, it's at the U.S. Botanic Garden. In odd years, it's at the Smithsonian at one of their museums. So this year, it's back at U.S. Botanic Garden. and it's looking fabulous. It'll be going on for at least 10 to 12 weeks, I believe, through April. And they do switch out the orchids. So if, say, you go now, in 3 to 4 weeks, you could visit again, and you might see different orchids being highlighted. As
you have
things
your
come in and out of
finger
bloom.
on the veritable pulse of this area, don't you, Kathy?
I'm like,
you are insane. I am a little
surgeon
country
for
mouse
local
out
gardeners.
here getting.
We'll come down.
That sounds good.
And we'll go to the U.S. Botanic Garden together sometime, Marianne. Yay! So thank you, Marianne. Say your blog and your book title.
My website is smalltowngardener.com, and my book is Big Dreams, Small Garden, which is perfect for this time of year as you're getting in front of that huge expanse, whether it's 6,000 square feet or 60, and going, what should I do? I have no clue. So that is there. You can follow me on Instagram and see things like me chasing my chickens. Actually, I don't do video too much.
All right. And
that was a pleasure.
And thank you, Marianne, for joining me today. And I was going to say on her book, what it basically is a breaking down of projects, correct? So you're talking about not taking on too much at a time.
That's
and
right.
It's like,
if you think about it, it's sort of like a self-help book for gardeners with lots of tips and advice. And it breaks down the process into visualizing it and then achieving it and maintaining it, which nobody ever talks about. And well, they talk about it later, but they don't tend to talk about it in the books.
The maintenance, yeah.
And then, of course, enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say they'll.
You got to sell the dream, and I like to think that I'm selling the dream with a realistic idea of what that dream is, so that you don't make yourself neurotic and end up in a mental institution in your 30s. I mean, who wants to do that? So better that you.
Actually,
well, exactly.
I was
because
say,
you and I are stressed out over these huge gardens we've created. So if I just read my own darn book, 20 years ago, oh well.
So it's the book that you would have wished you had read back then.
I do, actually. It would have been helpful. It's like I'm okay, you're okay for the gardener.
Exactly. Fabulous.
All right. Yes.
So we're going to end there because we're all
and plunge into spring.
Take a deep breath, smell some, and punch into spring. And visit me at WashingtonGardener.com. In our March issue of Washington Gardener, which is coming out in a week or so, we're going to have a wonderful list of tasks for what to do in the garden. But I want you all to take one or two of those to tackle, and don't feel like that list is some type of onerous
good for you, Kathy.
Over your head. That's me. Yes, it's merely a list of suggestions.
That's right.
And what you can be doing in the garden at that point. So in every issue, we have that task list. We have a list of local gardening events. We have plant profiles and profiles of fun people,
fun and
like
cynical.
Marianne Willburn. So join me. Yes. So join me for our next podcast, which I am not going to commit to a regular posting schedule. I'm going to post as fun things like the Philadelphia Flower Show happen. So it'll be more seasonal in that right now there's going to be a ton of posts probably in the next coming months. And then there might be a dry period. And then there might be a whole slew of more posts in the fall.
Bye, Kathy.
So thank you all for listening.
My pleasure.
And thank you, Marianne.
Happy gardening, everyone.
You can find Washington Gardener online at WashingtonGardener.com, on Twitter at WDC Gardener, on Instagram at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook.com at Washington Gardener Magazine.